right now, in some sterile, windowless pilot kitchen somewhere, it is already autumn.
Oh, absolutely.
Depending on when you are listening to this deep dive, you might be, driving with the windows down, sweating in the heat of July. Maybe you're clutching a wildly overpriced iced coffee.
Sounds about right.
Right. But while you are firmly planted in summer, this massive, invisible culinary clock is just actively ticking down to fall. There's a whole team of food scientists furiously engineering the exact moment you'll feel ready to, put on a sweater.
Yeah, it's a massive operation.
It really is. So today we are investigating the hidden mechanics of what we affectionately and, well, sometimes begrudgingly call pumpkin season.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere. And our guide for this is a fascinating insider article. It was published right around this time of year, July 2026, by a commercial fruit puree supplier called Purée Arete.
It provides a really remarkable vantage point for us because we as consumers, we only ever interact with the final product, right? Like the things sitting on a grocery store shelf or written on a chalkboard menu.
Yeah. Right, the finished illusion.
Exactly. But this source material, it drags us behind the curtain into the actual manufacturing world. It reveals an entirely different reality about what seasonal food really is.
I kind of look at the food and beverage industry like this massive orchestra tuning up behind a heavy velvet curtain.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
I mean, you and I are out here enjoying the summer sun, completely oblivious of the fact that there are hundreds of chemists, chefs, and product developers back there. They're tuning the strings, adjusting the brass, just making sure every single note is calibrated.
Getting it perfect.
Yeah, so when that curtain finally rises in September, the music just hits you right in the chest. We're going to figure out exactly who is pulling the strings of your autumn cravings.
What's fascinating here is that we tend to think of pumpkin as just a flavor, like a seasonal gimmick.
A marketing push for lattes and scented candles.
Right, exactly. But when you look at the supply chain data and the product development side, that Purée Arete outlines pumpkin is not just a flavor. It is an emotionally engineered anchor for the entire food industry.
Wow.
It really is a foundational pillar of modern food science.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand just how foundational it is, we really have to look at the secret calendar of product developers.
This timeline is wild.
It's a massive disconnect. There's a total disconnect between when you, the consumer, think pumpkin season starts and when the industry actually fires up the engines.
Right?
Like if you ask a random person on the street when it starts, they'll usually point to the local coffee shop changing its menu, or maybe the first cool breeze.
Or when those giant cardboard bins of pumpkins just magically appear outside the supermarket doors.
Yes. But the people actually manufacturing these products, they operate on a timeline that completely defies the weather.
They really do. The Purée Arete article points out that true pumpkin season begins months before anyone takes that first sip of a fall beverage.
We're talking August.
August. And not outside in the changing leaves, but inside, around these stainless steel tasting tables and in pilot kitchens all across the country.
The source gives these great, vivid snapshots of what happens in those rooms, too. You have a brewer standing there with a clipboard asking their team if this year's pumpkin ale needs a slightly bolder finish to compete with market trends.
Yeah, or a smoothie developer in a lab coat wondering if a pumpkin and pear combination might finally hit the right demographic this year.
Or a bakery team fiercely debating whether to use maple or brown butter as the accent note in a new pastry filling. I mean, they were opening notebooks from last year, pulling frozen puree samples, and just running endless iterative tests.
And in those rooms, nobody needs to announce that the season has arrived. The source notes that the industry just feels the shift.
Like a sixth sense.
Exactly. The process begins with hushed conversations and hundreds of tasting spoons. A food scientist will taste a prototype and say, I love where this is going, but it needs something to round it out.
Or let's run one more batch to check the viscosity. Wait, let me stop you right there and push back on this a bit.
Sure, I could.
If pumpkin is literally just the same old orange squash every single year, why are all these highly trained chemists and chefs sweating over tasting spoons in August? I mean, isn't pumpkin just pumpkin? What on earth is left to figure out year after year?
It is really tempting to think of agricultural ingredients as static commodities, right? But that completely ignores the reality of food manufacturing. Agriculture is inherently volatile.
Oh, because of the weather and stuff.
Exactly. When a product developer says, let's run one more batch, they are doing so because the physical properties of the crop change. Depending on the summer rainfall and the soil conditions, the Brix level might be slightly different this harvest.
The bricks
Oh,
level.
sorry, that's the scientific measurement of sugar content in the squash, so that might change. Or the moisture content of the puree might shift.
So if you want your pumpkin ale to taste exactly like it did last October, you can't just follow a static recipe. You have to actively reformulate it to compensate for the reality of this year's crop.
Precisely. If last year's crop was naturally sweeter, and this year's yields are slightly more uh, astringent or earthy, you have to adjust the surrounding ingredients. You have to hit that exact same flavor memory for the consumer.
That is wild.
And furthermore, consumer palates themselves drift over time. What tasted perfectly spiced 5 years ago might taste entirely too sweet to today's market.
Right, everybody is leaning heavily towards savory and complex profiles now.
Exactly. Innovation in food science, as the article wisely points out, isn't always about inventing a completely new fruit out of thin air.
It's about tweaking the variables. It's like seeing a familiar ingredient and adjusting the balance so perfectly that the familiarity feels exciting all over again.
That constant, rigorous iteration is literally the only way a product remains relevant for decades.
Which brings us to the biggest misconception I had before reading this material, and I bet a lot of you listening share it.
The flavor dominance.
Yes. When we buy a pumpkin-spiced anything, we naturally assume the pumpkin is supposed to be the star of the show. We expect it to just punch us in the face with flavor.
Right. But the article reveals that dominating the flavor profile is almost never the goal.
Never.
In fact, if the pumpkin flavor is the loudest thing in the recipe, the product developer has usually failed.
Which is crazy to think about.
It is. But experienced food scientists know that pumpkin puree is not there to steal the spotlight. Its actual job in a recipe is highly functional. It's a workhorse ingredient.
The functional properties listed by Purée Arete are genuinely surprising. I mean, it gives physical body to smoothies so they don't separate.
Yep.
It adds richness to artisan sauces and savory soups. It creates a very specific velvety texture in seasonal desserts, and it brings a necessary depth to craft beers.
It acts as a chemical harmonizer. The source explains how the physical properties of the puree actually alter the ingredients around it.
How so?
Well, the natural starches in pumpkin can soften the sharp medicinal bite of gingerol.
That's the active compound in ginger.
Right. It also elevates subtle maple notes. It even makes oats feel significantly creamier on the palate without requiring additional dairy fats.
Which is huge for the booming plant-based market.
Exactly. It physically balances the warm, aggressive spices we typically associate with autumn.
I love the musical analogy the article uses to describe this because it just frames the science perfectly.
It really does.
Think of your favorite autumn treat like a band. The spices, the cinnamon, the clove, the nutmeg, they are the flashy lead singers.
Oh, yeah.
They are out front, wearing the sparkly jacket, stealing all the credit and taking the bows. But the pumpkin is the rhythm section. It's the bass player and the drummer doing all the heavy lifting in the shadows, keeping the entire song together.
The rhythm section metaphor is surprisingly accurate, especially when you look at the chemistry. Just like a bass line dictates the groove of a song, pumpkin dictates the mouthfeel of a product.
The mouthfeel.
Yeah, it contains pectin, which is a naturally occurring structural carbohydrate. When you add pumpkin puree to a liquid, that pectin creates a microscopic network that traps water molecules.
Oh, wow.
And that is what gives a smoothie its body. That is why a sauce doesn't just run off your spoon like water.
So if you remove the pumpkin, the product feels structurally thin.
Exactly, just like a song feels hollow without a bass line. You might not actively taste the pumpkin, but your palate immediately registers when its physical structure is missing.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because if pumpkin is this functional, structural powerhouse that softens harsh flavors and adds viscosity, that makes it the ultimate blank canvas for manufacturers.
A total blank canvas.
And that explains the sheer staggering breadth of companies buying this stuff. We aren't just talking about coffee shops and pie makers here.
Not at all. The applications stretch across almost every aisle of the supermarket. You have frozen dessert teams chasing the perfect melt rate for ice cream. You have bakery manufacturers dialing in the moisture content for shelf-stable fillings. You have massive beverage conglomerates developing ready-to-drink pumpkin chai lattes.
But its utility extends far beyond human treats, too.
Right.
The article specifically mentions premium pet food treats and baby food. Now, I have to push back on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
When I see pumpkin spice dog treats or autumn harvest baby food, my cynical brain immediately thinks this is just pure emotional manipulation.
I get that.
Like, are companies just slapping pumpkin into dog biscuits to trick millennials into buying fall vibes for their pets? Is there any actual, tangible nutritional validity to this, or is it just a marketing canvas?
It is a totally fair critique, but this is one of those rare instances in the food industry where the emotional marketing perfectly aligns with biological utility.
Really?
Yeah. Take pet food, for example.
Yeah.
Veterinarians have recommended pumpkin for decades because it is densely packed with soluble fiber.
Oh,
It absorbs excess moisture in the digestive tract and regulates canine digestion. So when developers circle pumpkin on the whiteboard for a new line of premium dog treats, they are doing it because it is nutritionally sound, structurally useful for baking the biscuit, and, yes, emotionally resonant for the owner making the purchase.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And baby food.
The logic is remarkably similar there.
Hmm.
Anxious new parents are scouring labels for simple, recognizable ingredients.
True.
Pumpkin is a non-allergenic, easily digestible, complex carbohydrate with a naturally low glycemic index.
Oh, that's great for kids.
Right. It provides vital micronutrients like beta-carotene, but its flavor is neutral enough that an infant's developing palate won't reject it. It is a functionally bulletproof ingredient that parents already inherently trust.
So it crosses demographic lines because it physically solves problems for product developers, whether they are feeding a 30-year-old at a brewery, a toddler, or a golden retriever. And because it is this neutral structural base, creative teams can just go wild with flavor pairings. The combinations being tested in these August pilot kitchens go way beyond standard pumpkin pie spice.
Oh, way beyond.
The purée arrêté piece listed developers pairing pumpkin with cranberry, which, makes intuitive sense, but then they mentioned pear, pumpkin and chai, pumpkin and espresso, pumpkin with dark chocolate.
Turmeric is another fascinating pairing mentioned, as well as pumpkin with oat and pumpkin with black tea.
Turmeric, wow.
Yeah. If we connect this to the bigger picture of food science, these unusual pairings work specifically because of pumpkin's harmonizing properties.
Right, the rhythm section thing again.
Exactly. Take espresso, for instance. Coffee possesses bitter tannins that can be quite harsh. The natural sugars and the physical viscosity of the pumpkin puree smooth out those tannins, allowing the roasted notes of the coffee to shine without requiring an overwhelming amount of refined syrup.
It's the ultimate bridge ingredient. It makes aggressive flavors like turmeric or espresso palatable to a mass audience. Some of these wild combinations will become massive bestsellers that you see stacked on every end cap, and some will never make it past the tasting room. But the ingredient itself affords developers the safety to take those creative risks,
It allows a deeply familiar comfort to constantly surprise us.
which naturally leads to a huge question. If it is functionally perfect in the kitchen, that explains why food scientists love it. But that doesn't explain why we lose our collective minds over it every single September.
No, it doesn't.
There is an annual consumer paradox that the article calls out, and it is painfully accurate.
Oh, the coffee shop scenario.
Yes, someone is standing in a coffee shop in late August holding an iced latte, sweating through their shirt, and they look at a new promotional sign and groan, it is way too early for pumpkin.
We have all witnessed that exact scenario.
But then literally 2 weeks later, the temperature drops maybe 5 degrees, the humidity breaks, and that exact same person is the very first one at the counter eagerly asking, hey, are the pumpkin products in yet? The flip happens instantly.
And there is hard neurological science behind why that flip occurs.
Really?
Yeah. The Purée Rate article backs this up by citing researchers at Penn State University. The PSU researchers have extensively studied how seasonal foods trigger these seemingly irrational behavioral shifts.
Okay.
They found that it isn't about tasting a squash. It is about how our brains process olfactory memory.
Break that down for me, because this is where the biology gets wild. How does smelling cinnamon and pumpkin physically force a memory of a cool Saturday morning or a trip to an apple orchard? Why is the reaction so visceral?
It comes down to human anatomy and the way our brain routes sensory information. When you experience a sight or a sound, that sensory data travels into your brain and hits the thalamus, which act like a biological switchboard.
Okay.
The thalamus then routes that information to the relevant processing areas. It is a mediated, somewhat logical process.
Okay, so sight and sound have a middleman.
Exactly. But smell is entirely different. When you inhale the complex volatile compounds of baked pumpkin, nutmeg, and cinnamon, those odor molecules hit your olfactory bulb.
And what does that do?
The olfactory bulb does not route through the thalamus. It has a direct, unmediated neural pathway straight to the amygdala, which is the brain's emotional processing center, and the hippocampus, which is responsible for storing and retrieving episodic memories.
So smelling these specific seasonal ingredients is essentially a biological bypass valve. It hotwires its way straight past your logical brain and triggers your deepest nostalgia.
That is exactly what is happening.
Mm.
The scent profile of pumpkin spice physically forces your brain to retrieve the emotional state you were in during past autumns.
Wow.
You remember the comfort of Thanksgiving, the crisp air, the sense of community. The food industry isn't just selling you a pastry. They are leveraging your olfactory bulb to sell you your own happiest memories.
And the scale of this nostalgia engine is staggering when you look at the agricultural footprint. The USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service, or NASS, tracks this data. They confirm that pumpkins remain one of America's most widely grown specialty crops. And a specialty crop designation means this isn't just, commodity corn or soybeans sitting in silos.
No, not at all.
It requires specific, time-sensitive harvesting and processing windows. We are dedicating thousands and thousands of acres of American farmland and navigating an incredibly complex supply chain specifically to feed this neural pathway every fall.
This raises an important question about the nature of industry trends, though.
How so?
If you look at the broader food and beverage landscape, trends are remarkably fleeting. Every summer brings a new must-have flavor profile or a viral, brightly colored beverage driven by social media.
Oh, for sure.
And within 6 months, they completely disappear from the market.
So what does this all mean? The purée arete source explicitly argues that food trends come and go, but pumpkin creates traditions. Why does pumpkin survive when the viral summer drinks die? Is it simply because it tastes better?
It survives because of the emotional mechanics we just discussed. A viral summer drink requires a massive, sustained marketing campaign to convince you that you want it. It has to generate artificial urgency.
Right, you have to be told to buy it.
Exactly. Pumpkin, on the other hand, waits. It sits quietly in the background until the exact moment the weather changes, and your brain naturally, biologically, craves that specific neurological comfort. It doesn't need to shout to be noticed. It is an emotional anchor masquerading as an ingredient.
Because it genuinely reminds people of something they already love, rather than trying to convince them to love something new. It's incredible to think about the journey we just took to understand this one seemingly simple ingredient.
It really is a journey.
We started in those secret, windowless August pilot kitchens, watching food scientists stress over Brix levels and agricultural crop variations. We broke down the invisible chemistry of the puree, how the pectin traps water to build physical body, and how the complex carbohydrates mask the harsh tannins of espresso and ginger.
We saw how it acts as the culinary rhythm section, doing the unseen structural heavy lifting for everything from craft beer to baby food, while the aromatic spices take all the credit on the label.
And finally, we landed on the hard neuroscience of the olfactory bulb, realizing that the food industry isn't just reacting to a season, they're precisely mapping the neural pathways of our memories. The next time you find yourself at a cafe, taking a sip of a fall beverage or biting into a seasonal pastry, remember that you aren't just tasting a squash.
No, definitely not.
You're experiencing months of hidden engineering, agricultural logistics, and biological hot wiring.
It radically changes how you perceive the grocery store aisles this time of year. You stop seeing products and start seeing the underlying functionality and emotional architecture of the food system.
Absolutely. But going through all this research leaves me with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over, and I want you, the listener, to think about this too.
Oh, here we go.
If pumpkin puree is secretly the textural and emotional rhythm section of autumn, leveraging our hippocampus to sell us nostalgia, what other seasonal ingredients are secretly pulling the exact same strings in our brains during the rest of the year?
That is a great question.
Right. Think about the sudden explosion of strawberry flavors when spring hits, or the absolute dominance of peppermint when winter rolls around. Are they just simple, pleasant flavors? Or are they, just like pumpkin, highly functional, emotionally engineered anchors, quietly bypassing our logic to sell us a feeling? Think about it. We will catch you on the next deep dive.